Hi there, readers. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm Lauren Schultz here. I'm a romantic suspense writer, and we are reading The Last Consort Escape, a romantic suspense series. The series is one that's filled with espionage and mystery and suspense. And if it's something of your interest, then we're going to go ahead and read it. So thank you for being here. And I am enjoying a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. This is an actual New Zealand blend. So that's what I'm going to be drinking today. So I don't know what you have, but hopefully it's something delicious and wonderful. So sit back and enjoy. Hi there. Thanks so much for being here. Lauren Schultz here. We're going to go ahead and start reading The Last Consort Escape. That's book one of the Last Consort series. So let's go ahead and start. Thanks again. Prologue. At the watershed, the boy crouched onto his knee, bloodied, pained, and surrounded by an encompassing whisper of the wintry forest. Perhaps it was fate that permitted the moment between him and its ironic sense of grace. Eric was dead. His lips trembled suddenly as the adrenaline faded and Winter's call took control, taking advantage of his injuries. He'd lay himself there to rest in the forest with no one to mourn for him, never to return. He looked up the glowing orange of the fire that had gained distance behind him and tried to swallow his breaths, slowing the rapid puffs, trapping the shape of the air for a moment. He finally came to realize how cold he was as he stopped running from the heat of the blaze. Night had grown over the day, the moon looming high above, painting the forest evergreens. Their towering tops were crowned by a bluish tint. Is that what death looked like for everyone at its door? He leaned heavily into the body of trees and pressed his hand tightly against his wet side. He was dead. But who would he haunt? He was alone, and it frightened him for the first time ever, the realization of self. There had to be a reason why he remained, with his face carved like a pumpkin from Evan's knife, the surrounding trees encircling him as their dying needles lay softly beneath his feet. The blue glow began to widen, consuming the evergreens before him, the ground beneath him. He collapsed to the ground on all fours. The world was a dizzying swirl of memories and sights. The air smelled of damp bark and wood. He took a deep breath and struggled forward, crawling past the blue. Out of sync, he stopped moving, trying to control his thoughts, the blood cooling his skin and a forceful chill traveling up and down his body. He pulled forth with trembling hands. Eric was dead, but there had to be a life for him. Time had become a distant concept, vanishing from existence. The world surrounding him changed into distorted, incomprehensible images. The twigs beneath snapped as he pressed against them, some imprinting themselves into his hands and nails. How long had it been? How long could he hold on? He stopped again, realizing that he'd lost too much blood. The blue engulfed him. Then he knew. It was too late. He would die as Eric. He looked up to the heavens, the tiny sparkle from the diamonds up above, and pleaded to an unknown being, a being as secret and distant as the very question he'd always asked, why he was. He was nearing darkness, the entrance to a reality hidden by mortal man until he removes the cloak that binds him to the earth. He was slipping into the nude. Look, it stumbled out of the wilderness, a voice from nowhere barked. The voice was familiar, but he was cold and distanced by his injuries, unable to comprehend, unable to control his words. What did he say? Doesn't matter. What are we going to do with him? Finish him off? He's not far from it. No, we're going to help him. This kid is valuable. Al, Evans is gone. He's out of the picture. What are we supposed to do with him? I say, put him out of his misery and bury him back there in the woods. We'll be free and clear of this whole mess. It all ends with him. And it begins with him. Grab his legs. Part 1. Not until he made a confession. A man always carries around with him the weight of all things he has done wrong all his life. Not until he makes a confession of these wrong things will they change their upside down position and be right again. Unknown. Chapter 1. I can't help her, he said in an exasperated tone. You can't what? I said she's your patient. He looked over toward the woman. This couldn't be happening. He'd crossed county lines to escape. He didn't feel like waking up from the dream he called living, even if it wasn't that much of an existence. I can't take her. Son, you're not able to select who you want to work with. Now, I said she's yours. It's Monday, the floor is crawling with folks, and you're free. The doctor spoke with a southern twang to his birth and death of his sentences. He watched the metallic clipboard pressed against his chest as if it was a cursed artifact from the tombs of Egypt. What the hell is wrong with you? You wouldn't understand. Please give her to Lopez or Jillian. He rubbed his face, a quick pull of his skin. The old owl-eyed doctor glared back at him and asked, Old girlfriend? Those your kids out there? No, it's not that. She threatened you? He laughed. No. Why? What's wrong? He thought of the woman sitting in the waiting room, two children attached to her hips. Then the room became warm and musky, like damp wood. The sound was silenced by the darkened sound of fear, so thick that it dizzied. Then the screams, their pleading voices. Then came the knife. He touched his cheek alone in his thoughts. Heaton, you all right? Yes, sir. Good. Now she's your patient. I better hear nothing but compliments, because if you slip up with a case as simple as this because you didn't want to work it, I'll knock your knees out so we can see eye to eye on the matter. He looked down at the file in his hands, shaken by the reality that his past had just collided with his present. Section break. She had been waiting for 2 hours, but it was beginning to feel like 4. The room was filled with people of every color scheme of the rainbow of humanity. They waited patiently and impatiently to be called for shots, bandages, or for a physician's assistant to tell them their festering sore was just the flu and to go home and drink some juice. Patricia scanned the room, finding dozens of untold stories, secrets, and histories of those in the room for her to imagine up like some sort of weirdo, having no problem accepting her lunacy as the sunlight began to peek through the limited number of windows to the room. Coughs and mumbles acted as a voiceover to the small television that sat isolated in the rectangular waiting room's corner. She couldn't hear what was going on. Only a few people averted their thoughts to the screen. Afternoon television was something she hadn't experienced in months. She casually turned her head and stared at the glowing box as the woman dressed in a pink suit sauntered onto the screen and fell desperately into an overstuffed floral printed couch. The camera zoomed in, creating a poor attempt at depth to reveal a single tear falling from the actress's left eye. It remained on her cheek, never performing the natural act of gravity's pull down her cheek, sensually tracing the skin. The story was gone amongst the voices of reality. She laughed and checked her watch for the 100th time. Patricia hated hospitals. They gave her an itch and a fever and a lump on her right foot that had a strange blue and black color that pulsated with irritation. She admitted that she had spread this hatred to her children. It stroked her daughter's hair as it tamely fell down her cheeks in 2 braids, juggling their attention from the sick Lisa to her right and the very active Alex to her left. She hated every moment she had to watch her child suffer. She'd travel the world for them. She'd do anything in her power to protect them, anything. She'd always be the one to protect them from not only the evils of the world, but the evils of her secrets, the evils of the past. A shrill cry from a baby nearby jolted her thoughts back to the reality that they were still waiting. The same nurses and attendants had passed her so many times that she felt that they were almost mocking her. One had even begun to look familiar. She wrinkled her brow as she watched him carefully, his tall, slender figure moving about the space of the room. He moved with ease and confidence through packs of people, chairs, gurneys, complaints, threats. Nothing fazed him, nothing deterred him from the metallic clipboard in his hands until he looked up, called a name, greeted the person, and led them to another section. Then his eyes went back down, she assumed. She watched, trying to recall past events where she could have seen the man before her. She's distracted by her daughter shifting in her seat and her son tugging on her shoulder as if trying not to disturb her, asking if they could leave. She stared any longer, he'd feel her stare. It was a secret gift, human gift of psychic communication even skeptics understood. Alex leaned his head against her chest. They were her life. It was for them she prayed each night. Just the sight of them alone, Lisa's round brown eyes shining back at her and Alex's sleepy little grin made her feel victorious and happy to share them with the world. They were the only benefit from her soured relationship that ended 3 years before. The divorce was followed by 1 year of unemployment and family conflict. As a mother, she was able to admit, as she struggled with day-to-day issues, that she had made mistakes. Sean had been controlling and refused to allow her to continue school. She paid the consequences. She never thought she'd be in such a situation, but she had been. There in the hospital waiting room, She waited as a single apartment renting bookstore manager with secrets deeper than most, who starved for something more and who was just beginning to take control again. Lisa Carter, an nasally voice called from behind. Right here, Patricia began as she softly shook the sleeping child. Wake up, hun. Groggy with a sleep directed walk, Lisa slipped her feet to the floor and rubbed her sleepy eyes. She walked much like a dancer with her long legs and knobby knees. Alex, his voice laced with concern, tried to comfort his older sister with a loving pat right before taking Patricia's hand. They followed the nurse who sat them in a small nurse's station and checked Lisa's vitals. They waited there for another 15 minutes. She looked at her watch again and scanned the room for the nurse she had seen earlier. Mrs. Carter, follow me. Someone will be with you in a few minutes. The nurse spoke from the doorway of the closet-sized room. She took her daughter's hand again and followed the nurse to a curtained area. Have a seat. They were left alone again in the company of hospital equipment and the conversation of a patient on the other side of the pink and blue striped curtain. I don't like the doctor, Mommy, Lisa complained as she rubbed her left ear. Lisa, try not to rub your ear, okay? Let the doctor see. But I don't like Lisa. Now listen, I know you don't like the doctor, but the doctor helps people get better, and Mommy can't make you feel better without their giving me instruction, all right? I'm right here. Nothing will happen to you. In fact, you'll feel a lot better. The curtain abruptly swung open to reveal a stocky, seasoned doctor wearing a stylish pair of brown glasses teetering from his nose. He looked as if nature decided to push him back toward the Earth's center with his evenly plumped arms, stomach, and legs. He spoke into the chart in his hands, his untrimmed eyebrows moving as he spoke. Mrs. Carter, one of our nurses will work up your daughter. Don't worry, he's very good, very efficient. But I want a doctor. I'll be back once he's done. Don't worry about a thing. With a quick turn, he was gone as if the southern-born Rumpelstiltskin in the flesh. Wait a minute, she spoke, following the white coat. I've been here for nearly 3 hours. Why can't I have a doctor? You will in a minute. Yeah, that sucks. You get the nurse. Another voice from above her interjected. She looked up to find the nurse she had been waiting in the waiting room. With him inches away from her, she returned to a place often forgotten and silenced. It was him, the mysterious person who had entered her life and exited like a day to the earth, like a tide on the shore. You're not the first person he's done that to today. The truth is, insurance will only cover a 3-minute review by the tallest nurse, he said as he looked down the hall. He smiled a handsome but modest smile that barely revealed any teeth, stretching his wrinkle-free skin to one side of his face. He was a definite member of the How Tall Are You Club, standing well over 6 feet, a hypnotic pull locked in his gaze. His face was handsome, one that would season over the years to make him a senior citizen with perky college cheerleaders at his feet, regardless of the scar that ran diagonally along his face. He looked downward as he ushered her back toward the examination table where her daughter waited to be examined. For a moment, she worked with feelings of anxiety and a slight hint of frustration. Why couldn't she say anything? Her life began to play in quick blinks of each year, faces of those she had known, events come and gone. They all came to life again, pausing for a second, long enough for her to recall the participants. He asked a few questions before he looked directly at Lisa, his eyes on the clipboard. He wore a gray long-sleeved top beneath his blue scrubs, seemingly giving his long arms even more length, which he carefully slipped back over his wrist after putting on a pair of purple gloves. Okay, Lisa, can you tell me where it hurts? She shook her head as Alex waddled over and tugged on the nurse's leg. It hurts her here, he spoke, tapping his left ear. Alex, she began toward her son. No, it's okay. Do you want to get up here too? Alex nodded his head. Patricia watched from her place with a developing smile. Where does it hurt her? Alex pointed to his ear again. Is that right, Lisa? Does your ear hurt here? She nodded her head and frowned. The discomfort was building. What's your name so I can name you my honorary nurse? Alex, and I'm 4 years young. Patricia covered her face with her hands and stifled a laugh. Really? He looked back at Patricia. Well, we're going to help your sister Lisa feel better, okay? Lisa bit her lip and put her hand against her ear. Her face had finally taken shape into the image frozen in Patricia's mind from previous doctor's visits. The snobby, upturned nose wrinkled like that of an old woman. Her lips became thin and pulled, vanishing from her face only to enlarge her pretzel-colored skin. There was an itching Patricia suffered greatly from as she watched her child near tears. Just as her face could not get any more tightened, just as the tears began to dampen her tightly closed eyes, just as Patricia began to leave her seat, the nurse slowly raised his hand, ushering her not to worry. He removed the stethoscope from around his neck and put it on Lisa's shoulders and explained what it was used for, as well as all the other instruments. Then he asked, Lisa, Do you like the circus? He looked in her ear. I do, bellowed Alex. You do? Well, what about Lisa? She nodded her head. Have you ever seen a unicorn? They're not real, she answered. Really? I once saw one at the circus, magical golden horn and all. He wrote something down on the chart. They also have elephants and tigers and camels. Did I say elephants? She nodded her head. They also have cotton candy. Do you like cotton candy? Her face relaxed with another nod of her head. I do. I like cotton candy, answered Alex. I don't know if Lisa can have it. I'll have to check your throat to see if you can. Patricia smiled softly as Lisa opened her mouth and allowed her examination to progress. Patricia could almost see the images of fake unicorns and bears wearing pink tutus thudding ungraciously around the center of a circle before the audience. He turned and announced to Patricia as part of the show, I think she can. She watched as an outsider as her children's feet swung happily against the hospital examination table and their childish wonderment expressed in questions that the nurse answered with equivalent excitement. What is this called? He asked as he placed the stethoscope over Lisa's shoulder. A stethoscope, answered Alex. Can I have it? You're so smart. You'll have one your own day. You'll have one your own day. But you can't have my stethoscope. You can have these. He gave 2 lollipops to Alex and 2 to Lisa. The nurse had removed himself closer to her. She listened to his words as they fell into her ears from his height. She didn't know his name or who he was. He was almost mystical in her mind, his identity hidden by the darkness of her childhood, by events whispered only in nightmares. But he was there, suddenly right there, his face becoming whole, linked with the time in her life, his eyes, the scar. The nurse nervously wrote on the paperwork before him, flipping unnecessarily through the layers of paper. He remembered her. He could see the discomfort, the uncertainty. You're very good with children. Only sometimes. You should have seen me an hour ago, he said, avoiding eye contact again. He heard her son talking about clowns to his sister, and the voices of another health professional in the adjacent curtained room. She blocked it all out as she thought back in time, back to memories purposely pushed away, memories where the man before her existed as a teen. I've always wondered what happened to you. What do you mean? He asked, his voice distanced as he worked his way to the examination table to remove the waxy sandwich wrap that distinguished patient from patient. She walked up to him and stopped his actions. I know you remember me. Why are you avoiding it? His gaze fell upon her, his face coming into full view, the same face of the boy that saved her life so many years before. The tears had begun to well up, despite her attempts at keeping control. William, my name is William, he spoke. That's my fault. He fumbled with the bottom of his scrub top. My name tag, I wear down here. The voices of the busy emergency room had vanished in his announcement, and her children's voices seemed to gradually fade into a void. Patricia didn't know whether to hug him or shake his hand. She didn't know what to do or say to this person who seemed to expect nothing in return. Patricia had no idea what she looked like with the given information. Taken aback for several reasons, she stood and stared at him. For years, he remained nameless. She finally had a name to his face. You have a name, she said, almost to herself. Of course I have a name. He was very hesitant with his words, and even his glance, as if making contact would cause the world to know how they knew each other, building an emotional wall between the two of them. He went back to his paperwork. Of course, I remember you, but I think it's a good idea to act as if neither of us has seen the other person. So you expect me to walk away as if I never saw you? Yes, that's the better way, Patricia. He remembered her name. Nearly 10 years faded, and he remembered her name. He had been the person who saved her from execution, yet he acted as if the act had been merely moving a little divider for the next shopper on the conveyor belt of the grocery store. William, Dr. Hobbs needs you down the hall when you're done, a nurse spoke from the curtained opening. He nodded in her direction and began. I'm glad to see that you're doing okay. No, wait, can I treat you to a cup of coffee? I have some questions that maybe you could. I can't. I'm busy this week. What about next week? I'm busy then too. There had to be 1,000 questions that hovered in her mind, coming to life and formulating into more questions and more turns. It was like sitting in front of a one-sided answer key-based box, down locked in a clear box with a key super glued to it with the note marked guess what. And she was far from the word okay. Please wait. You saved our lives. I don't know how to show my appreciation. Let me get the doctor to confirm what I already told you. That's how. He passed before her, Slowly, the world seemed to turn, as if she had acquired the ability to feel the actual movement of the earth, consistent, slow, turning. Confusion hit her at full force, like the downpouring rain that could be heard from the emergency room now filling the streets again with this parade. She didn't really know how to react to this ironic meeting, but she couldn't walk away. So many unanswered questions loomed. Never had she felt safe. Her family probably never would feel that assurance that so many people took for granted. She felt a strong hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. William spoke. Paperwork. Had to get the doctor's blessing. Be sure to read all the instructions. He'll be in a second, give you Lisa's prescription. Thank you, she said, this for more reasons than one. You did a good job, Lisa. Keep an eye out for Alex, he said as he patted Alex's head. I've got to go. It was nice seeing you again, Patricia. Bye, Lisa and Alex. Goodbye, Alex said. Patricia looked down at the papers he had given her, then focused down the hall to find his tall figure speaking with a white-coated individual. Farewell, answered she thought as she slumped back into the plastic chair of the room, holding her child in her arms. Section break. Look, Mommy, I'm a clown, Alex announced as he colored his lips red with the lollipop he had just received. How he had slipped it from her purse, she didn't know. The road sparkled from fallen rain as the headlights from the moving car glided over the darkened pavement. The once heavy rain had recently lightened up, allowing Patricia to see the fast-moving scenes before her. Only a light mist hit the windshield, splattering against the glass, becoming yellowish balls of light, darkening and lightening again with the movement of the small vehicle. She drove with her mind in a different place, forgetting about the hazards of stormy weather driving and the sticky mess she would have to clean once she put her children to bed. Lisa was still groggy. Patricia knew she'd sleep like a hibernating bear once the meds entered her system. She hated drugging her children, but she knew they would both like each other a lot more once Lisa felt better. Can we go to the circus, Mommy? Alex asked from the back seat. His little voice was drowned out by the sudden scream from her mother as she bolted to the bedroom of the small cabin she and her sister had been enjoying not long before. Then she saw him clumsily lean to the doorway of the room, blood streaming down his face, one hand pressed with intensity against his cheek. Rochelle, what are you doing? There's no time. I'm here to help you. Leave us alone. I told you to stay back. Get in the closet, her mother commanded to both she and her sister as they immediately squeezed into a small closet in the room. Hurried breaths in the dark, Patricia and her sister sat quietly with racing hearts as the sounds of the boy arguing with her mother continued. Then came the suffocating smell of smoke. Do you want them to die? There's no time. Leave. Let me help you. You're just here to help yourself. With what? What are you talking about? The cabin is on fire. Your husband has you on his death list. She remembered hearing other voices from the other room, items crashing, the world seemingly crashing around them as she pushed herself in the corner, Christine wedged against her. The voices grew louder. Move, Rochelle, the boy commanded. Threats were commanded by another pair of voices in the room, with alarming tensions that fed into her rapid heartbeats. Patricia and her sister waited anxiously for the unknown pressed against the wooden walls of the closet. Hiding from whom? Had they no clue? The boy confronting their mother, the voices, or both? He knew they were there. In the dark, the duo clung together. Get back, she heard the boy's voice commanded. Take another step and I'll fire in your face. Rick, grab her. Time didn't exist for her at that moment. Who was he shouting at? Why was their mother not cooperating? What did she know? Suddenly, the door to the closet swung open to reveal the nameless boy standing there, searching wildly, a gun in his right hand, and blood smeared on his left as he extended it to them. Come on, I'm here to help you. Come on, quick. Patricia took his hand while she grabbed Christine. It was a maddening scene around them as they rushed through the room. There was another person ahead of them with their mother thrown over their shoulder, kicking and fighting wildly. She could see flames leaping like whips against the wall of the open area of the front room of the cabin, the smoke burning her nostrils. Then there was the sound of a firing gun, the ring radiating through her head. Keep moving. Don't look back, the boy commanded. They swiftly moved out of the cabin to a vehicle parked hurriedly on the trail. The air was cold with the first bits of snow waiting to fall, yet the heat of the blaze took over. The boy swung the back door open to the car and ordered them to get in, as the other person set their mother in the front seat and settled themselves in the driver's seat. They were being escorted. Rick will take you someplace safe. I promise you. You'll be safe now. He spoke to Pat and Christine. The boy reached from his back pocket and pulled out an envelope. Rochelle, there's about 20 grand here. Do not come back. Their mother snatched the envelope from his hand. He had to be no more than 17 or 18 years old. His face stained with blood from a wound on his face, his expression laced with a silent sadness. What have you done? Where's my husband? Headed to hell where he belongs. Get them out of here, Rick. The car began to move, to where she didn't know. Everything was turning quickly in a whirl. Patricia turned, watching through the vehicle's rear window. The cabin was in full flames while the boy stood there watching the vehicle, alone, unflinching. With that, he turned his back and walked away, never to be seen again. That is, until that evening when Patricia had thought to finally pack up the kids and sit in the emergency room. Section break. Patricia put the paperwork from the hospital and her car keys down on the kitchen table. Lisa fell asleep almost immediately in the large chair near the small framed window that overlooked the adjacent alley. Mommy, can I wear my clown pajamas? Asked Alex, his head barely nearing the table's edge. Alex, honey, you don't have any. Can I get some? Maybe, Lex. She was getting tired of hearing about clowns at the circus. Come here and give me a kiss. She took a moment and looked at her son, his round face and innocent grin. He looks like his father and would turn out to be a handsome man. She wondered for a moment, staring at the innocence and wonder captured by his penetrable eyes, the sticky mess of the lollipop still on his lips. If Sean had once been the same way, what had turned him into what he presented to her, to others, or had it just been her? We'll see about the pajamas, okay? But first, let's clean that sticky sugar off your face. Patricia lifted her son like she often did and cleaned his face and hands with a warm, soapy washcloth. Her thoughts still couldn't stay still. They changed into new forms, different subjects. They continued to fade into forgotten memories, flashing like a magician's handkerchief over objects that were once unseen. Perhaps it was best that things were unanswered. What would happen if she knew what was behind the doors never welcomed to her view? Would she be responsible for whatever was there? She kissed Alex's forehead, his soft brown skin against her lips. Both he and his sister had replaced those desires. They had become her quest. The nurse, the nameless face finally crowned with the reality of identity, her hunger for answers were no more than segments of her past. Yet it was a past that was too dangerous to ignore, a past that was leaking into her present. Its toxicity would always impact her decisions, her existence, even the lives of her children. That is what frightened her most, and she had no idea how to stop it. How about your spaceman pajamas? You love those. He leaned his little head against her chest. Okay. All right then, get down and go into your room and I'll be right behind you to get you ready for bed. He slipped down and ran into the hallway. I'm flying like an astronaut, he said, creating a new word like he often did. Patricia smiled at her son and turned her body toward the paperwork at the table. Make sure you read the instructions. She'd never been prompted to go through the carbon papers with their Easter egg colors. It didn't take her long to figure that there was something more with his instructions, began to fumble through the sheets. Then she found what she'd been hoping to find. If you want to talk, meet me at Jack's place on 6th Street and Morgan Avenue, 6 p.m. tomorrow. Hope to see you. Signed, William. His writing was tiny and meticulous, almost as mechanical as typed print. She carefully folded the paper and held it tightly in her hand. Perhaps there was hope. He was the key to answers she never could have accessed. But was she prepared? End of chapter. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to read with me today. Again, we were reading The Last Consort Escape, book 1 of the Last Consort series. Tune in next week and we'll go ahead and get into chapter 2 if you'd like to keep reading along. If you'd like to actually purchase a copy of this book and read ahead, it's available on Amazon and only 99 cents. Thanks again for joining me. Take care.